He's prepared to testify, we are told by a confidant, against President Trump, against members of the Trump family, and others in the White House. He is prepared to testify that President Trump, as a candidate, Donald Trump, directed him to make contact with the Russians, which contradicts all that Donald Trump has said at this point.
Now that would be a big deal, except there's only one problem. It wasn't true. And it led to the suspension over the weekend of ABC News chief investigative correspondent Brian Ross. ABC News issued a correction, noting that President Trump instructed Flynn to contact the Russians after the presidential election as part of the transition team, not before. This is their quote. As a result of our continued reporting over the next several hours, ultimately we determined that the information was wrong. Effective immediately, Brian Ross will be suspended for 4 weeks without pay. Here now to evaluate how all of this was handled, Howie Kurtz, host of Media Buzz. Howie, good evening. Good to see you tonight.
Hello, Martha.
This is egregious.
Egregious doesn't begin to describe it. It's hard to overstate what an awful mistake Brian Ross made in rushing on the air with a half-baked story based on a single, unnamed source. It's like playing Russian roulette with your career. And in fact, he blew a hole in his credibility, and he deserved to be suspended.
Yeah, because, and we should point out, that there's a big difference. If the president was instructing Flynn before the election, during the period where the Russians were trying to meddle with the election, it goes to the issue of potential collusion. It also would bring up the Logan Act, which would mean that a private citizen was interacting with a foreign government on behalf of a future president. But as a transition member, he had every right to do that. Whether or not it turns out to be above board, that's another question.
Right. It's night and day. It goes from having a whiff of collusion to being routine diplomacy when you have the president-elect in charge. And ABC, though ultimately took pretty strong action, initially was just tone deaf on this thing. First calling it a clarification, then it was upgraded to a correction, and then came the apology and suspension that you just read.
Yeah. And it really did have reverberations across ABC. Watch this.
Breaking news.
Oh, my God. Oh, breaking news. ABC News' Brian Ross is reporting Michael Flynn promised full cooperation to the Mueller team and is prepared to testify that as a candidate, Donald Trump directed him to make contact with the Russians. Yeah! So on Friday's show, apparently I was guilty of premature evaluation. People are slamming this as fake news. But to me, it's a mistake. It's not he didn't deliberately put out a false piece of information. Yeah. He made an error.
So she's surmised that it was just a mistake, which it may very well have been. But
sure,
as you say, when you put something like that out, it does ripple across an entire network. And if not corrected quickly, it continues to cause problems.
Yeah, and it contributed to a 350-point plunge in the stock market, so these have real-world consequences. But it's just kind of sad to see Joy Behar throwing up the card and celebrating that the President of the United States may have been implicated in a criminal conspiracy. And, of course, it turned out to be flat wrong. And so that was her comedic way of, I guess, eating it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really surprising. I mean, given Joy Behar's background, and she makes doesn't hide the fact of how she feels about the president or whether or not she would like him to succeed, regardless of whether or not she likes him. So, Howie, thank you very much. We all have to be careful, and we're all human, and we do make mistakes. And he's suspended for 4 weeks, so that's the end shot on that. Howie, thanks a lot. Good to see you tonight.